The first thing I want to talk about, I notice most of you are working with a dark screen and a dark sort of Batman environment. You can change that and make it bright and shiny like mine if you want. I find it easier to see white against dark, and it's easier to see in the classroom situation. But I also like it because from the beginnings of time, we've been making dark marks on light backgrounds. That's just sort of the way that people draw. And to me, working on a black background is like Elvis paintings on black velvet. I mean, just like, it's not how I see stuff. It's up to you. But let me just show you a couple of ways you can control how your screen looks. And that's up here under the AutoCAD button. And down here, this is AutoCAD's options, and this is just like edit preferences in Adobe or any kind of program where you're sort of setting how you want things to work. So we go to options. And the first choice you have is whether you want your whole theme to be light or dark. And that's sort of all the control surfaces like that. Do you guys have a preference in terms of how you see this on the screen? Light or dark? You like it dark. Okay, well, we'll leave it dark. Okay, so that's that. Let me go back to edit options. And then within this, for instance, you have a choice whether you want to have the scroll bars turned on, which you can use for panning horizontally and vertically. And frankly, they just take up a little bit extra space that you don't need to, because you can always just pan by pressing with your mouse wheel and dragging. So there's really no point in having them, but let's just turn them on to show you what they look like. And that gives me these guys over here where I can do that. But I can also do it just by pushing down on the mouse wheel and dragging, which is faster and much more intuitive. So I almost always have those turned off. Can ignore that. Colors, let's go there. Where we're working in the AutoCAD world, where we're doing all this drawing is in this infinite space. We're drawing our rooms. We might be drawing a bunch of little details up here. You might have a site plan at a different scale down here, but it's sort of all in this one place that's called model space, and that's just where you draw. It could be called draw space. And then in paper space, which we'll get to in a bit, that's where you're setting up title blocks and putting views in them at whatever scales and with whatever annotation is appropriate. And for right now, we're just entirely in the model space. And Revit has much the same thing. Pretty much all the programs have that. And you can tell where you are. Down here are tabs where you can choose to be there or to get into a layout space where you can start putting things on title blocks. AutoCAD options. Let's go to colors. The reason I ask about model space is that we have a choice here within our working environment, what color we want any of these kind of things to be. And I would suggest leave them pretty much just the way they are. I liked having a white background just because that's how I think about drawing, is dark lines on a white background. If you want to change that, help yourself, whatever looks good to you. I've seen some really garish light chartreuse background and purple lines. I don't know, it gets pretty painful after a while. I try to keep my environment as neutral as possible so my eyeballs don't sort of absorb all the color. The cursor has its crosshairs. You can change the color of them. Any of those you want to change, you can do. For instance, if I wanted, to start out being black. And the main consideration, one of the considerations light to dark, is dark colors, like a dark gray, that might show up very well against a white background is barely going to be visible here. And vice versa. A light yellow line will show up very well here, but be almost invisible against the white background. So you just gotta choose. Since I know that I'll be plotting on white paper, I almost always leave my background white just to preview that as accurately as possible. White. And if white is a little too bright for me, we can go into this select color and I can make it light gray. Just, I mean, anywhere you want. There's, a billion colors. I'll leave it there for now. No, I won't. I'm going to turn it back. Colors. White. Also, you see, right now, my crosshairs are maybe, I don't know, 10% or 5% of the way across the screen. If you want that, if that's just huge and unwieldy for you, or if you're doing things you want to be able to line things up that are very far apart, you can make those crosshairs longer or shorter at your discretion. A couple of people asked about moving the command line around. You know, when you start AutoCAD, it looks, you know, it's sort of down here, just floating. I find I've been doing AutoCAD since 1985 or sometime, and I just always look up here for my commands. If AutoCAD expects me to look somewhere else, I just get confused. So for me, parking them up near the top works best. That's just sort of where my eyes go to start something. But you've got options, and part of that has to do with how much screen real estate it takes up and how much you have. On a small screen, if you put it up top the way that I kind of like doing it, it just takes up just a lot of real estate. That you know, we're only using the first, you know, third of this or something or other, and all this is just wasted. So there are a couple options. If you notice, I'm grabbing this by the it's like a little handle, a bunch of dots. I don't know what that's supposed to represent. A couple of places you can put that. One is leave it here, or if it's, you know, you want it out of the way or somewhere like that, you could put it up there, just floating. You can have it float over the ribbon. Like if you decide I never want to use this stuff, you can. You drag it up and I think hold down the control key at the same time and then let it go. It'll just sort of park right there, which a little hard to see because it's semi-transparent. Note that one of the command line options is transparency, so you can adjust that depending on where you set it. Parking it at the top or the bottom probably makes the most sense. Let's see what's involved there. It's called docking. When you drag it up here until it takes it sort of disappears and becomes just an outline, at which point you can drop it, makes room for itself so it's not on top of anything else. Just its own space. And frankly, since we're not really using the ribbon right now, I could shrink the ribbon down just to get a little more space on the screen. I can also park it down here at the bottom where it doesn't take up as much space up here. But again, that sort of sticks it down at the bottom, and I'm used to looking at the top. For me, just the way I work, this is the way I prefer to do it that way. And you'll see this is sort of a pain. Right now, I've just got like 3 of these lines, and I really like to see more. You know, if I'm in a dialogue about a rectangle, there might be 4 or 5 or 6 lines asking me, you know, size and length and direction and stuff. But I can't resize it while it's up here at the top. Weirdly, I have to drag it down to the bottom, resize it here, and then drag it back up. Don't know why, just the way it is. That's the deal with setting up your screen. I'll leave it, I guess I'm in the dark theme, but with a light background. The tools we used yesterday were line, draw. I can do draw line. F8 turns ortho on and off. The quickest way is just typing L and then the space bar, and I'm ready to do that again. I think most people who work quickly with AutoCAD productively end up using the keyboard shortcuts just because they're much faster than having sort of change your focus and drag your cursor somewhere out where it, you know, away from where it's working. Let's look at the circle. And all these with an arrow next to them so there are a couple of different ways to draw that, depending on the information you have. You have a center and a radius, you center and a diameter. What I want to call your attention to are these 2 down here. Well, let's do the circle radius first. You indicate a point and then a radius. I want to put a circle inside this box, I can just draw circle 2 point, which will take 2 points on the diameter and create that circle. 2 points. I'm going to pick, remember I've got my object snap set to be picking midpoints. So I'll pick a midpoint and a midpoint, and it just creates that circle perfectly tangent size just right. There's a 3-point circle. What would be a good illustration of that? Well, I'll just do it. C for circle. And then when I'm not picking off the menu, I can just type the abbreviation I want for the option I want. So I'll just say 3P, enter. And it's going to ask for 3 points on the circle. I'll say one is here, and one is there, and another one is down here somewhere. So we'll be getting a circle that's going through all 3 points that you do. And there's, unless they're in a line, there's always a circle that will go through any 3 points. Will you ever need that? I don't know, but it's there. Okay, if you remember, we used move and stretch on Monday. Move moves whole objects and does not change their shape. Move an object, picks all the lines, picks all the vertices, and takes it from one place to another. Stretch, on the other hand, should really be called move vertex or move vertices, or move control points. Stretch doesn't move objects per se, it moves their endpoints, which ends up moving the objects. So for instance, if we want to make this closet deeper, let's say, I'll use modify stretch. The one thing about stretch is we have to use one of the crossing selection modes. If we're picking it with a window, going from right to left, and that way we can move them any direction we want. You need to be careful. You can also do this kind of a thing if you don't have your ortho lock turned on. So stretch. So moving vertexes, not directly the objects themselves. And as you're working on your plans of the interior design suite, you might well find that your closet ended up being too big and you need to stretch it smaller to make it fit the actual dimensions you have. And if you remember, stretch also stretches the control points of dimensions, which are the points that you've picked. So if I know that I wanted that to be exactly, if that distance should have been 3 feet, I know I need to stretch that over 13¼ inches. Stretch. And I will include the dimension in that. 13.25 inches. AutoCAD does not have the ability to pick the dimension and change it and change the geometry that it's talking about. Revit does. Revit dimensions are actual tools. In AutoCAD, it's telling us what's there. It's not controlling what's there. Another tool for modifying objects after they have been created is rotate. Modify rotate. Window everything. Hit enter because I'm done selecting them. And then it asks me, there are a couple of tools like this that will ask you for a base point to be the sort of focus of the operation. In this case, I'm going to say right here. I'm going to turn F8 off, and now I can rotate this around that point. The point could have been in the center, it could have been way off here somewhere, but that's the point that it'll be revolving around. Another tool that uses a base point is the scale tool, which is this guy, or modify scale, where you select what you want. Again, specify a base point, and then it will let you do this by eye, or we can do it where you type in dimensions, to type in a distance to tell it how big to be. But that's the basic idea of commands that take a base point and then have something happen around them or from them. Other tools we looked at earlier to modify existing entities include trim and extend. We saw trim already, TR for trim, where it gets rid of, erases whatever you want, whatever you hover over until it hits another entity. But let's say you had something like this, and you wanted to trim this horizontal line between the two endpoints, get rid of all of this in here. If there are 100 of those, you don't want to have to go pick. So the trim command also has the option, instead of it finding the cutting edges, you tell it what are the cutting edges. So trim, and if I type T here, see the capital T is blue and capitalized. So I have these options: T for cutting, C for crossing, O for mode, P for project, E for erase. I want to type T to pick the cutting edges. And I'll say I want to cut the line with this and this, hit enter, and then I can get rid of that all at one go. These have evolved over time with AutoCAD. This is fairly, actually, just being able to pick just trim, just this kind of trim is new. You used always to have to pick the cutting edges and then pick the thing you wanted to get rid of. So actually, this tool is the one that's new. Extend works a lot like trim, just in the other direction. EX for extend. And again, we have boundary edges, which are what we're going to extend something to if we want to. If you don't pick anything, whatever you pick will just extend until it hits something. If I don't want to have to keep doing that, and I want to take this all the way to here, I'll do extend. Oh, I can click on the word boundary edges. I can type B. I think those are all my options. I'll say make this my boundary edge, and then I'll just extend it all the way to there. A couple of little ones. If you need a hole in a line, modify break. Click once, then click again for the second point. Fillet. We haven't really explored it yet. Right now, it's set for radius of 0. But if I want to put a 1 foot radius on these guys, then I can type R for radius, or just select the word radius and say 12, and then do that wherever I need to. With a polyline, like a rectangle, you can do fillet polyline, where it'll go around the whole thing and put that 12-inch radius on. And that can be really nice. Let's take again the case of a garden path where you might have drawn it with straight lines, but then you can just turn them all into rounded lines. Chamfer does something similar. Modify chamfer. A chamfer is just an angled fillet of a corner of where two lines meet. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to set the distances both to be 6 inches. And you'll do that. You can set it by the distances. You can set it by the angle it forms with the first one you pick. It's useful on 3D solids where you can do that to the edge of an object as well. Just angle that off. If you've done that in SketchUp, it's kind of a pain. You have to make a negative form and extrude it along there. With AutoCAD, you just say chamfer this edge and it trims it off. Blend is an interesting one. It's pretty new. Let's just take let's say I wanted to get a sort of a nice even. I've got these two shapes, but I want them to be connected. Blend takes these two and sticks a spline on there. that is tangent to both of them. I don't think I've ever used it on a real project. Usually I'm looking for something more straightforward like that, or I'd actually put a radius on there where it's a little more under my control, not the program generating the line. This can be a pain to offset those and then keep trimming them. I can take any connected series of lines and arcs, which these are, and turn them into a polyline with the join command, and then offset them all as one group to make a path. So join, select this, select that, enter. And now that's all one polyline. Offset 2 feet. And we can offset the polyline 2 feet that way or 2 feet that way, either one we want. And that starts becoming a useful design tool, multiple offsets of things. If you decide, no, this one I want to do something else with, but it's sort of stuck being a polyline, I can explode it. And now it's back to its component pieces, which I can do whatever I want with. And lastly, at least the last one on this page, is the lengthen command. Let's say I wanted this to keep on going for a while. I don't really have anything for it to hit, but I just want to see it longer. If I use stretch, I can't control its angle. But if I use lengthen, shortcut is LEN, I can pick that, and then I can say delta would be 5 feet longer. Total would be however long the one I want. If I use the dynamic one, I can just move that line, preserving its, as a vector, I'm preserving its angle, but changing its magnitude is really what's going on there. And I can do that from either end. Just a couple more, and then I think we'll just start work right on your homework assignment. Copy we've seen, offset we've seen. Mirror is interesting. That's M-I-R-R-O-R. And with this, you select some objects, and then you create sort of I'm going to use F8 here, the mirror plane that's mirrored around. And then at the end of every mirror command, it says, do you want to erase the source objects? Yes or no? And I'm going to say no. I always forget that, and it disappears. So once I have those, I could then pick these, mirror to a horizontal one, and start building shapes up. I didn't say no. Oops. MI for mirror. Erase source objects, yes or no? No. And sort of like that is the array command, which can copy something either multiple instances in a line, or more like a desk laid out in a room, in a grid, or it can do it as a circular array. And let's look at each of those quickly. So if I go to draw array, it's actually under modify. It's under modify. It's under modify because I'm starting with an existing one as opposed to creating a new one from scratch. So I have a choice between a rectangular array, path array, and a polar array. We'll do rectangular. And now it's asking me how many and how far apart. And if I just drag this, I'll get more of them. And if I drag this, I'll get them farther and farther apart. And that is a much faster way to start laying stuff out than placing them and hoping for the best. And the nice thing is, once you're done with it, those remain active. So if you're, I gotta leave room for a door, you can shrink them back down to leave room for a door over here. So I guess this is count. Yeah, that's the number. That's the Oh, that's both. That could be. I've never done that before. A circular array. Let's just put some chairs around a table. Oops. I don't know how big these are, but let's say I want well, a bunch of chairs around this table, but I don't know how many yet. I'll use the array tool. They call it polar, I guess, because looking down from the North Pole, they don't call it circular, they call it polar. So select the object, enter, select the center point, which will be the center of this circle. I'll just get close to it. And then I can rotate them, or I guess I can increase the distance. Well, at some point I can okay, this is actually a new tool since I oh, I for items. I8. So we have that same array. Anyway, play with those to your heart's content. The point being, there's a lot here that AutoCAD will do for you instead of you spending a lot of time trying to make things come out even. I mean, AutoCAD does math really, really well. So let it do it. Okay, just a couple of selection methods that I didn't show you. Well, let's do explode this. And I want to erase all of these guys, and there's a bunch of other things in there that might be getting in the way. But if I do E for erase, and then type F for a fence, then we're going to put up this dashed line, and anything that line crosses will be selected and erased. It's just another, we had that lasso, we had the window. This is just a line tool that will select stuff. If I start doing, let's say, erase, oh, that's the one we exploded. And then I realized, no, I want to leave this arc right here. I've been building a selection set of things to be erased. And if I type R to remove something, it will come back out of the selection set and no longer be erased. So I'm sort of in a removal mode now. If I want to start going back to adding things to that selection set to be erased, I type A to add, and then I can start picking other stuff. Okay, one last thing, two last things. Let's move all these. Selecting them and moving them. And then I've drawn something else and I realize, oh, I would like to go back and get those guys. I'm going to say move, and I can type P for previous. And it will remember the last object or objects that I picked, which is much handier than having to go through and pick them all over again if there are, 20 of them or something. And lastly, there's erase. And gets rid of everything in the drawing. And I forget if it's everything that's in the window, undo. No, it's everything. And that doesn't take into account things that are on layers that have been locked or turned off or frozen, but we'll be dealing with layers next week. Doing anything to all is sort of a major deal.